because we are also in a bit of a budget crisis, not a bit, a dramatic budget crisis, especially coming from the state. And what we face in the coming years is rather bleak. I think I went, instead of the efficiencies, and wouldn't it be great to have a manager over there kind of managing things, we're going with elevating Chris Taylor to be the new fire marshal and not hiring an assistant or a deputy fire marshal full-time. So Chris Taylor will be the fire marshal, but he'll have no Chris Taylor. That should realize a significant savings of anywhere from $70,000 or so a year. So we're into finding opportunities when they present themselves to through attrition mostly to find ways of saving and being efficient. That's our plan. It still needs an approval from the Board of Selectmen. The new chief, our chief Mike Finkelstein, will be the emergency management director. It's very common in towns, for especially a town like us, to have its police chief. Now that we have a police chief, we make him the emergency management director. In the time of a crisis, a major disaster, he commands a presence, and he has a command presence that is appropriate. And Mike is going to be able to handle the job, and he'll receive a stipend for that work as well. But all in all, again, there'll be a savings built in with removal of that position of about $60,000 or $70,000. As you know, it made the paper, made a little bit of a splash, but it only told half the story. Press is here or not. I don't want to offend them. They told a great story that we submitted a budget of 0.0 increase in our expense side. In our budget, you'll receive that in about a month's time. It doesn't tell the full story. The full story is the other side of the page, the revenue side. We're going to see significant decreases in revenue. So as much as I put in a 0.0 and I can control the expenses to some degree in our town, I can't control the revenue and the loss of revenue. Loss of revenue of tuition because there's less kids coming from Salem. Loss of the sewer assessment payments that the sewer department was paying the town because our sewer assessment is now paid up. So the money that the sewer department owed the town, I'm putting this in simple terms, but I think I'm doing a good job, correct me if I misspeak, which was $300,000 a year, it's now down to a zero. They've paid their bill. But that's a significant revenue decrease to the town. And of course, the state revenues. We received a $1.2 million holdback from the governor, and we will receive what's reported to be about another $313,000 as of today. We don't know what the legislature will do by the time they get to the May 9th deadline. They also have an option, this being a biannual budget, that they could do nothing and leave the budget as is, which is staring at a deficit of hundreds of millions of dollars. I spent the day today at COST, which is the Connecticut Council of Small Towns, their annual meeting. We're Keith Faniff from the Connecticut Mirror. I urge you to open up the ConnecticutMirror.org every morning and read what they have to say. It's real. It's what our legislatures read to know what's going on, frankly. The picture's bleak. The only, I wrote a lot, but the only quote I really kind of took and highlighted was at the end that the revenues in the state will never increase faster than the costs, period. That the burden of pensions, budgets, CBEC, whatever, not pointing political fingers, but the pensions and rising costs will be significantly outpacing revenues. The burden, and the theme of this was the burden's going to come down onto the municipalities. And that's just the bottom line, and that's the way it is. I have a handout I'll give you. I forgot to bring it. It's sitting on my counter. As Anna rolls her report, I'll give it to you. But area towns and like-sized towns in our area and what their state aid is. in ours. And I talk a lot about how Saybrook has almost nothing, and Waterford almost gets nothing, and Old Lyme gets almost nothing. Well, they do, and we get $8 million, down to $7.5 million next year. We have to prepare for that money disappearing in the next 5-6 years, just disappearing, just gone. The state will not be able to sustain itself. So we need to pay our own bills, and that will mean significant tax increases on property taxes. That's the real story. We'll do everything we can. You do a fine job. I try my best to keep expenses down, to keep efficiencies way up, and to look for opportunities to keep the service levels where they are, because our citizens expect that. That's why they moved here. That's why they stay here. But we got to keep the costs in line too. There's that balancing act that we'll talk a lot about. That's when I walked away with my meeting. It was nobody left in a good mood, as you can well imagine. It's the reality of what it is, and again, I think we're going to have, even with, if you read the paper, a 0% increase on the expense side. We're still looking at, right now, the budget shows it will be at a 1.5 mil increase because of, well, Board of Ed has some expenses and a budget that you'll be looking over, and then of course revenue decreases. So we'll be still looking at 1.5. So that's a realistic number where it is today, and we'll have a couple months to work on that. Questions?
So for the COG shared services list, you checked off a bunch of things that we're currently taking advantage of. What is it that we're not taking advantage of that we could?
You know, while we discussed this, one opportunity came up that very interesting. The tribal nations sit at the table, and Mohegan Sun raised their hands and said, we have warehouses of toilet paper and other supplies. Can you imagine what they go through, right? And why don't we all get into a co-op? We're buying it anyway. And wouldn't it be great if the towns are buying directly from us, and we even have a higher volume? So there might be opportunities for just that little stuff, office supply, but it all adds up. And they're talking about the public works directors getting together and coming together, because nobody knows public works better than the public works directors, and putting them in the room, and they'll come up with things. There is other opportunities. Of course, we're talking about the Old Lyme police. And then there's in-town opportunities, and we keep talking to the Board of Ed about, do we maintain their buildings for them? Do we cut their grass? Why should they have grass cutters and we have grass lawn mowers?
And is that moving into any kind of real conversation?
Not yet. There's a lot of collective bargaining issues with the town doing school work. The legislators have opened up the opportunity for us to share that work if it's non-educated related.
Seems like the first person I heard say that was Wayne. That's how long ago
Oh,
I
God,
remember.
yeah.
It just seems like it's always just something that we should be working on, but we just don't.
I think it's coming.
Yeah.
I think our superintendent's a real good guy to work with. He's very open. He understands that he's got to focus all the money he can onto education. And if he can find a way to save money,
Okay.
so be it.
I was also approached by Old Lyme Board of Finance. They wanted to talk to us, but I've worked with somebody that works with somebody. They want to know about our vehicle maintenance plan and how we do our vehicle maintenance plans, because it seems like their plan is not as robust as maybe ours is.
Interesting.
So I just kind of started a conversation on that. Any other questions?
Yes. So, how many fewer Salem kids are we talking? A lot?
We'll get into all that. I think just the budget season. I don't know.
Your estimate on reduced, that's okay.
I think 30 maybe.
Your estimate on reduced revenue, what did you say that was, 500,000 or more?
From the state, 313,000.
Yeah.
Again, the from different pots of money.
Right, just back of a napkin. I'm not
Total
holding you to
revenue losses.
I think
Yeah, that's the same 313. That's it.
Yeah, okay, 22 students probably, but total revenue deficiencies from next year, have we totaled that up?
I mean, on the sheet, right, I don't know how some of this is, not everything is a linear
No.
deal, but, you know, I see pilot doesn't appear to be where it would be at this time of year.
That's the state revenues.
I actually have a sheet for you, we can talk about that.
Okay, all right,
When I give my report.
okay.
Are you talking about this year?
Yeah, well, right, so what we're gonna, well, you're right, I'm mixing apples and oranges. I was really thinking more about the forecast for next year, what the anticipated revenue loss would be. I know you may not know, I didn't know if there was
That
some
was the
gross
state.
number.
Are you talking about, the state revenue?
Yeah,
So,
like order of magnitude, we're talking.
I
so
thought,
this year we're getting 7.6 million from the state.
Yep,
And next year we're looking at 7.163 million.
okay, so $500,000, kind of. All right. My last question is, there's 2 items on the agenda that you didn't address under your section. Purchasing policy and the study of other town and wage benefits. Do you plan to discuss those?
I think your chairman can speak to the purchasing policy, because I think that committee's still, subcommittee's still in.
Yeah, what we did with the agenda, just for clarification, is because there was always things dragging at the bottom of the agenda that really should be up in this section here. The purchasing policy is owned by the Board of Selectmen, so felt like that was the right place to put it. And the town wages and benefits we talked about in the past, we wanted to carry it on the agenda for a couple more months till we get closure on that. So yes, I could talk to the purchasing policy if you'd like.
So, what, let's go back to what you just said. We're gonna carry it a couple more months until we get closure. What does closure mean? We're looking for a
So,
deliverable, aren't we?
so, Mark, last month you talked about June or July, you thought you would have a summary of the study that you're doing or somebody's doing for wages and benefits?
Right, we'll have that, I think it was June. We have to get through the budget cycle right now, we're kind
All right,
of focused on that.
So we
But
could do one
yeah,
of
we
two-
said we'd
Yeah.
deliver by,
We can do one of two things. We can just take this off the agenda for the next couple of months and bring it up in June if we remember it, or it's just there kind of like a placeholder, but it does confuse you, you're right, I mean, it is.
so how about here's the third option I would like you to consider. How about we leave it where it is and just say estimated discussion in July, just so we don't lose it?
Yeah, that's right there.
Put like in
Just put
parentheses.
Yeah.
June in parentheses.
Yeah,
and then we
because
can.
I'm never gonna remember to bring that up again, and
That's
why-
right.
yes,
here.
you will.
Right.
That's I'm gonna-
And then we won't talk about it every month until
Right.
we know we've all agreed there's gonna be some deliverable in July.
So we'll just ask
Okay.
if there's any new activity on the bloody.
Okay. So,
Purchasing policy is not any different than it was when I presented it to you guys last week. Like I was saying before, I have had a crazy month. I didn't get my edits out to the rest of the team until this weekend, I think. So shame on me for being a couple of weeks behind, but they now have the edits. They're now reviewing my edits. Anna has a copy of it right there. She's making her edits. She's gonna share it maybe with Joe, maybe with some of the other department heads to get their inputs. Our legal team will then look at it for legal expertise, and by the time the budget's done, hopefully the purchasing policy will be done. So in that June, July timeframe, we'll be ready to present it to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and get one last series of fresh eyes on it. Factually, functionality-wise, it should be no different than we saw last month, with the exception of it's East Lyme now instead of Eat Lyme. I corrected that.
well, what about the board's comments? When will they get factored in?
If there's comments, we can bring those in.
Well, because I had some last month, I think you asked us to wait till you cleaned up the draft.
Okay,
I'm happy to
okay.
filter them to you whenever you want, I just don't want the board's comments to be
It-
lost.
Anytime you want to filter comments, they'll be fed into the team, and we'll incorporate anything that we think. I would rather not do a tailgate inspection, right, and wait till everything's done.
Right, that's
and
why I
then do
had
another set
it
of
last
yours.
month, my good
Okay.
man.
Okay.
So when would you like me to,
It's draft, so you can send them to me in an email. It doesn't have to be, FOI kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's send them to me, and I'll share them with the rest of the team, and we'll incorporate, or we'll give you feedback as to why we don't think it's germane. if you would like it some other way, I'm in the point right now where I really need to get off that subcommittee, so if you'd like to participate in that subcommittee, we could do that too.
No, I'm not interested in doing that.
Oh,
I just want to give you my comments.
Okay,
I'll get them to you.
please do. Okay, any other questions?
I did have a question for Mark about the town wages and benefits. About a month ago, the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities put out its 2017-2018 survey of wages and benefits, and 130 communities participated in that. Is that something that you're utilizing as you're
That's
going
where
along?
we'll be
Because-
getting all the information. We've done this exercise. We've done it
Okay.
several times. We'll be just pulling information from that.
Okay.
That's the wage side. It's the contractual side. It's the
Right.
relationship that maybe unaffiliated, maybe union directors in other towns have with the town, and what they get for benefits, what they get for sick pay, how many days, and pension benefits, etc. Some of that's not in that.
Right, I just looked at that again, and I think that more information about benefits will be forthcoming. I think they're
Yes.
really trying hard to
Yes, they are.
put together.
Yeah.
And I think they have tutorials and everything, so they're really...
They're a good resource.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Okay.
And actually, I was just looking at that myself the other day, and its functionality is substantially better this year than it was a year ago. They've made
Okay,
some really
that's
good
good.
improvements to it.
Hopefully it's helpful.
And I think it's because CCM got together with COG to, and worked on it together, so
Right,
it's
okay.
a lot better than it was.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we will move on to our finance director.
In your packets, in your green folders, I put the final revenue report for the month of January. At the time that we put the packets together, there was still about $300,000 in tax revenues that we didn't have the documentation to be able to get posted in the system. So that's been updated. And also, I put the monthly highlight summary in your folder for you. And then last month, Chairman Weber had asked that I put something together that kind of highlights items that are concerns or just for discussion purposes. So that's kind of like on the back side of the general summary that you get. So I kind of put it, separated it by revenues and expenditures. So I set it up by the account, and then what the adopted budget is, and what the estimate is to get by June 30th, and then, of course, what the variance is. And you'll see on the revenue side that there are quite a few negatives there. So the first two items have to do with taxes, prior year taxes and interest and liens on prior years. So based on what we've received to date and what I estimated we'll get through the end of June, and the way I do that is I just look at the prior year. So those two items are subject to change and can change over the next few months, and perhaps we'll be fortunate and by the end of the year we'll break even on those. The next items are all state grants. The education cost sharing, in our adopted budget, we had $6.9 million, and what based upon what the governor did in November, we're expecting $5.9 million. So there we have a $992,000 shortfall based on what we originally projected. And in addition, I also have a note there that it includes $50,000 from the renters program. The state of Connecticut has a renters rebate program, and in the past, the state of Connecticut has fully funded it. And this year, what they said is, oh, by the way, cities and towns, you're going to be responsible for 50% of the cost of that, up to $250,000. So in East Lyme, our program is about it's a little over $100,000. So what the state will do is, in one of our ECS payments, they're not going to give us $50,000. That's the grant they're going to take that from. And then the state-owned property, our initial budget had 862,000. What we're going to receive is what you see, 176,000, so there will be a shortfall there of $686,000. The tax relief for the elderly, the state of Connecticut eliminated reimbursing us for that. So there's a mandated program that the state has for the elderly to get tax exemptions, and in the past they've reimbursed us for that, but they're stopping that. So that's another, let's say, $92,000 hole that we're going to have. And then the next one is the pilot for colleges and hospitals. We originally projected 41,000. We're getting that 445,000. So the shortfall there is, just under 25,000. Then they gave us the municipal stabilization grant. We did not budget for that, so that's 566,000. Now I will say, with regards to the state reductions, the way that we've planned to manage that is both we split the total net shortfall between the town and the Board of Education, and so we have, on each side of the government, we have implemented budget freezes to make up for that shortfall. So in other words, we're not going to spend the dollars, so that we'll break even on an operating basis with regards to the state revenues. And then also remember that we're making up about $300,000 of that shortfall by what we built into the mill rate. When we set the mill rate, it was, remember, it was $307,000. So, I actually didn't show that here, but just to kind of put it into perspective.
Because you're seeing the pure God on my face, that kind of thing. That's why you're saying that.
Well, it's part of the picture, as far as the state revenues go, because, we projected X, we're getting Y, and, so we had to do something to mitigate that.
Yeah.
And we had talked about that, we had discussed that at previous meetings about the budget freezes. And then other revenues, building permits. Based on what we've received today and looking back a year ago, we're looking at a $100,000 shortfall at year end. I did have a conversation with the building official just to see if there was anything big that he was aware of that I knew nothing about, and he said that there's nothing that he's aware of. So we could, things could improve between now and the end of the year, be better than they were a year ago, and then that number may be less, maybe more.
We may get the new apartments in by June 30th this year, otherwise it'll be next year. Now, there's significant building permit activity. 120 apartments, I think, were approved at the Gateway Apartments. It still has to go through a site plan design, but that might come before June 30th. They were anxious to get those things built.
So rough order of magnitude, what's the significant?
I don't know what that would be, but it's significant enough that it might come close to making up most of that shortfall.
That's
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then beach and recreation, of course, we have a little bit of, surplus there. However, that is going to be totally weather dependent. So once the spring comes along and beach weather, if we have great weather, sales are up. If it's not, if we have a lot of rain, then sales are down there.
So can you get it so that we have good weather?
And conveyance taxes, they're doing very well. You see, we're anticipating over $100,000 to the good at the end of the year.
What's a conveyance tax?
That was when properties change hands. It's a tax.
Sale of properties.
Sale of
Yeah, you want to pay taxes
It's a
on that.
tax,
Of
Yeah,
course
we
they
lived in
do.
our houses long enough, we don't remember that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And one thing I'll note on the conveyance tax revenues, we did have one large sale that took place, and that fee was over $38,000. So that's a contributing factor to why we're doing so well there. And then tuition for other districts, that's really the tuitions that the Board of Ed takes in from, primarily from Salem students. And this year, we're projecting that's gonna come in at 300,000, so it's actually gonna be about a little over 180,000 more than we originally projected, provided that the student level stays the same.
We just said it's going down.
Yeah.
But
So
that's-
that's for next year.
Right, so it's not gonna be the same next year.
So when we talked about the new
If you're saying it's
schools,
going
we
down.
talked about the
Can I
population
see the
going
revenue,
up.
what it is for next year?
The Board of Ed said it was going down, and this says it's going up.
This is this year's.
Well, no, but you can't go up this year or down 30 next year.
I know, that's why I asked the question.
That's
I
a
know, it
little.
doesn't sound.
Well, what it is the freshman class coming in next year is that, I believe it's 22 students less than the senior class that's graduating this year. So that's the reason for the shift in the revenue next year. But the Board of Ed provided me $2.7 million for projected revenue for next year.
But this sounds like the freshman class is bigger than the sophomore class, because it's gone up this year.
So I get that it's going, projection is down for next year. I heard that.
We do this in the
But I
years,
don't
too,
understand
okay?
this. It's up, they're up greater this year than expected,
Well,
but
we originally projected 2.8 million, and right now, they're trending at where they'll be at $3 million by the end of the year.
right, but it's gonna drop.
More students.
Next year.
I understand that there's weird numbers, especially when you start bringing in the grade school with the high school, because we see the trend when we talked about the grade school is that student population's going up, and then we look at the Board of Ed budget, and it says student population's going down. High school, got it. This one here saying it's going up. It just seems inconsistent, and it's probably because we're looking at different populations, and that's why it seems like some are going up and some are going down. It's just kind of.
What's difficult for me is that is that money goes into the general fund. It's not a Board of Ed issue. It's not related to their budget. Their budget stands independent from the tuition they take in, which is sometimes difficult. So we're taking the hit, and they might stay flat or may get an increase or whatever. But,
Yes, that's another shade of gray on this whole thing. It's
Yeah.
just the whole student
Yeah.
population
right.
flexibility.
But, you know, I'll throw this out, and again, these are all questions for Mr. Newton when he comes, but I think they do some of that accounting in arrears. I think they project something, but then they kind of balance it out at the end.
What happens is after the year, they do a reconciliation.
Right.
And if Salem overpays, then they pay us that much less the next year. If they underpay, then they make it out in the next year.
And that number might be a reflection of what they overpaid this year going into next year. So there might be 2 years of decrease. We'll get that accounting for you.
So if we total these up without using a calculator, I'm back of a napkin, you use the calculator, right? I get like $1 million without, plus or minus something, that we're in the hole for this year,
But that's just.
without the 300,000.
But these are just, this isn't all the revenue. This is just
The-
a certain population.
Right.
of
And
it.
what was the criteria for choosing these?
I just looked at, I took anything that was greater than $10,000.
Okay,
Either
okay.
way.
Greater than 10 grand, I wondered how you did that.
Okay.
So it looks like you have, and to answer your question, it looks like your negatives add up to 1.887 thousand or 1,898,000. And it looks like the positives are 907 for a difference of 980,000.
All right, how's that for 1 million?
You're up by 20, come on.
Okay, so we're $1 million short in revenue for this year. For this year, before we even get into next year's problems. We have 300 we set aside, so we're 700 in the hole for this year, right? Do I have that right?
But remember,
Well, I mean,
we also, we're freezing expenditures.
is that gonna be enough?
We're freezing expenditures the expenditures are frozen to the extent that, we break